Alfred, and good morning. The Committee of the Whole is called back to order. Unfortunately, we don't have a quorum, but I'd like to thank my colleagues that have joined me this morning. Vice Speaker Tina Rose Mino Barnes, Senator Guåhan, and Senator Barnett. I'm hoping that my colleagues will join us shortly so we can begin our Committee of the Whole. And at this time, we'll go back to recess. Thank you. Committee of the Whole is called back to order. Thank you, colleagues, for joining us this morning. We'll begin with Vice Speaker Tina Rosemary Barnes on page 71, Agriculture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just to recap, Mr. Chair, when we last left off yesterday afternoon, I was asking OFB about the need for a $100,000 allocation that was included in this year's budget, but was removed from the Department of Agriculture section in this substitute bill. Mr. Chair, I was able, right after we recessed for the day, to get a hold of the agency's director, and she requested that, similar to other agencies, that we grant the Department of Agriculture the ability to carry over the unexpended balances in their current year budget. They specifically need this authority, colleagues, because the vehicles we insured were purchased this fiscal year is still for them going through the procurement process, and I was informed that the procurement of these animal control vehicles may not be finished by September 30th. So, Mr. Chair, I just want to note it for the record that I do have an amendment, but I'm going to move it to, based on the rules of engagement, I'm going to move it to the miscellaneous provision, and I have informed the clerk, and the amendment has been submitted, but because of what was said, that at this time, I wanted to make sure my colleagues knew what was going on, and then when we get to the miscellaneous provisions, I will provide that amendment, sir. Okay?
Thank you, ma'am. Does anyone else like to speak on Department of Agriculture?
If not,
You're good?
no, done.
Okay. Anyone? 71. We will now close on. Oh, Senator Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to ask if OFB's familiar with their invasive species fund. I see they're receiving this revenue that's listed here, but I'm also concerned because I heard that the Invasive Species Council has not met for some time unless something's transacted in the last month. Do you know what the status of that is? Because we have an invasive species problem on the island. And how is the fund being used, do you know? What is the balance from last fiscal year? And what it's being used for?
Yes, good morning, Senator.
Good morning.
Yeah, I am not aware of what the status is with the council, whether or not they're still actively meeting or what they're doing. The only thing is that as part of the department's request, that we are going ahead and funding funds out of the invasive species fund.
But do you by any chance know what the balance is from this past fiscal year? Has it been expended, and what is it for?
Okay, hang on. Senator, we don't have the available balance from last fiscal year. I'm sure we can somehow extract it, but at least for this moment, I don't have that information.
Is it something perhaps, I don't want to belabor, Mr. Chair, or delay moving to the other sections, but if OFB can follow up and just let us know, because I'm concerned. I know a number of our colleagues here have been very concerned about ensuring that not only that we have the fee available, who have worked to get into legislation the ability of agriculture to collect this fee, but we also want to make sure that they're properly using it, because as I said, we see a growing invasive species problem on the island, and we want to make sure that the money's being properly used for that purpose.
Thank you, Senator Brown.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Yes,
Chair.
I'll have OB make sure we get that information. Anyone else like to speak in the Department of Agriculture? If not, Senator Dueñas.
Mr. Chairman, and I wanted to, I was working on bringing this up because I do share the concerns of the retiring speaker. And so I just wanted to, because I remember this notification, and so I pulled it up in my email. I believe they did have, at least it was announced, and I was very happy to see this in my email, that this is Friday, July 5th. They announced the Guam Invasive Species Council meeting, fiscal year, fourth quarter, quarterly meeting. So there's information in the body of it. I'll forward it to my colleague. But I was concerned about the same thing. And it shows under their attached agenda, there's a hyperlink there with the new business, and it was the Guam Invasive Species Council meeting announcement with all these things to be discussed, and the public notice is there. I wanted to mention also, Mr. Chair, recently, I believe it's Senator Parkinson that introduced a bill, and we had a public hearing on it to take their funds because they had an adjustment to the collection. Steve, I think that's one of the reasons OFB can look into once again, is that there was an adjustment to how the fund was being collected, and so there was an increase based on that adjustment, and so that's why the bill was introduced. The problem with the way the bill was written was, not problem, but it needs some technical amendments to become a supplemental appropriation to ensure that the only use of that fund, and they had it in their testimony from DOAG, that all of those positions were being attributed to the staffing pattern attached that was all positions under Guam Invasive Species Council. So I believe they had their coordinator, which for the longest time hasn't been on board, and that coordinator works directly with UOG to kind of harmonize their work that they do together on fighting invasive species. But then it was also for some supplies, but all the other positions. You'll note if you look at their Guam Invasive Species division, you'll note that there's upwards of what it calls for somewhere around 30 positions. There, with this money that they were asking to be able to realize and actually appropriate in their budget for this purpose, they were going to bring on about 10 individuals. That would include the coordinator and also the field individuals who go out and do a lot of the eradication as well as prevention work, and working alongside with customs even at the interior of the border. So that's some information, but I'll send this to some of my colleagues that they did have a scheduled meeting. We'll make sure that they did it, but it was for July 5th, and so I was happy to see that too, because that was one of the things I kind of pressed them on when we had the public hearing on the Parkinson bill to appropriate the money. That's just a kind of a way of providing some point of information. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Senator Duenas. With that, I see no other hand for Department of Agriculture. We'll consider it closed. We'll now proceed to page 73.
That's me.
Guam Public Library, and there's amendment by Vice Speaker Tina Rose Munoz. Ma'am?
Sidus Mahasi, Mr. Chair. And again, Manana Sidus to the panel members there and to our colleagues. As discussed earlier, Mr. Chair, in the Committee of the Whole, this is the second half of my effort to appropriate the funds from the Guam Public Schools Library Resources Fund to the Guam Public Library System as prescribed by the local law. That would mean that the public library system is supposed to get 30% of this special fund. And I want to thank my colleagues, Mr. Chair, for allowing us to correct the portion given to GDOE, the Department of Education. And now this amendment will take that 30% allocation and give it now to the Guam Public Library System. So my amendment is very simple. It adds the language to the agency's budget as specifically, and this is how it reads. Page 73, line 4, to amend the bill to read Guam Public Library Systems, which is P1, appropriations, the sum of $1,582,644 is appropriated to the Guam Educational Facilities Funds, and the sum of $332,118 is appropriated from the Public School Libraries Resources Fund to the Guam Public Library System for its operations for fiscal year 2025. And then the summary of the of appropriations funding source the breakdown there, and it shows 1,914,762. And then to allow legal to make the technical changes and to renumber. So, Mr. Chair, I'm hoping that my colleagues can support this, especially because without this amendment, we will have $332,000 lying dormant in a government account when next fiscal year ends. And our Guam Public Library system has made incredible strides over the last few years, and this funding will ensure that it can continue to grow its educational offerings to our local students. But for me, Mr. Chair, the answer to why it is so important to support our local libraries is because they are a resource of knowledge, of professional and personal growth for our entire island, no matter your age, no matter how old you are. I'm excited that our dedicated library workers have big plans in store, including bringing in technology and resources that serve the blind and visually impaired. And I was just mentioning that to my colleague the other day, how they've really, Dr. Chris and his team has taken the time to make sure that that program is up and ongoing. And I also need to give the Guam Public Library Systems a big shout out for being the caretaker of legislative records. And thanks to these fine folks, researchers can touch the same papers that we were circulated in a session of the Guam Legislature held 10, 20, or 30 years ago. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'm once again asking my colleagues to support this amendment so we can ensure that the library system, the Guam Public Library System, gets the funding this body has promised to the agency, no more, no less, and just work with the law that has been in existence. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. Anyone else like to comment on this? Senator Brown, and then followed by Senator Nicholas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I certainly support our efforts of our Vice Speaker in her advocacy of the library. As I mentioned the other day, our library system here on island is severely underfunded. I wanted to inquire, how much do we estimate would that 30% be, and what can the Guam Library use those funds for? Because as I mentioned, they're understaffed. I mean, they have 3 custodial staff, to my understanding, to address the maintenance of the Hagåtña Library and all the other libraries on the island. And then, as I also mentioned, in most cases, these other libraries in the other villages are only open on average 2 days out of a week. And in most cases, they only have 1 staffer from the Hagåtña Library that's going out to staff, be it the libraries in Hagat, Barragata, or wherever they may be, which really limits the access of our community to participating and being engaged with our library system. And some of our, our students and others in the community don't have access to computers. This is a place that allows them to come in and do their work, do their studies, do their research. I don't think we can have a healthy community, even though, Mr. Chair, now we have all the benefits of modern technology literally at the tip of our fingers, be it our phones, our computers, whatever the case may be. Not everybody has that. Not everyone may have a home environment that is conducive to the learning process, and certainly these libraries provide that. But, we cannot be a healthy community if our children, particularly our children, even though there are a lot of adults, if you go to the Hagåtña Library, you're going to find a lot of adults, some even those that don't even have homes to go to at the end of the day, that go into the library to enhance their quality of life and their access to information. So I'd like to know what that money is going to do and how much is it, and how can maybe that help facilitate the needs where the needs are greatest, because we really have not, in spite of all this money that's been flushing through the government of Guam in the last few years, we've really not invested in the areas that really directly benefit our people in the community. So I just wanted to ask that so we can see where the library can use this additional funds to hopefully address these critical needs that exist there.
I think OB is looking that up right now to give you an answer.
Yes, Senator, based on the projected amount for the Public School Library Resource Fund, of 1.107060. 30% of that would equate up to $332,118.
Okay, and do we know what they can use those monies for? Are they open to using it to hire additional personnel, expand their library times, add additional custodial support to help maintain these facilities? What can they use it for? Are they limited, or can they use it for any of these needs?
The way we are appropriating it in the budget basically is like a lump sum
Okay,
amount to them, and which would be availed to however see fit their operational needs.
so they're not limited, and then I'm sure we can work with the Vice Speaker's office and her committee to find how they can allocate these monies to address these critical concerns of the library this upcoming fiscal year.
Absolutely.
Okay, I appreciate it. It's good to know they don't have the constraints so that they have the flexibility of prioritizing additional needs. Because as I mentioned, I think areas of the government where we have direct interface with the community and they get a direct benefit, to me, I rather support that. There's many other components that people of Guam never see or engage with. So I think anything we can do to support our library here in the community, that would be a tremendous plus for our people. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Anyone else would like to speak on the amendment? Senator Snickers, I'm sorry. I did recognize you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is really one of those things that are, that are very critical to our society. The internet has really, taken its toll on print media and everything else, and the library system is, it's one of those little holdouts that maybe remnants of the past, but very critical to our future. I've just been to the library and I see the wonderful outreach that they do. And the thing with this is, the kids actually just go to the library. It's something that you have to seek. And I see that, and the parents are so enthusiastic. They're about the library, and it's a wonderful thing. I thank the Vice Speaker for this amendment. And way back before smartphones and everything, when print, we used to get our newspapers, hold it in your hand with a paper, and smartphones and everything just changed everything. And anything we can do to sustain print, to sustain ways of cultivating our society through the minds of our young is a wonderful thing. I remember when I was young, I can remember all the phone numbers of all my aunties and the Agate Rectory and all that stuff. Now, because of this smart media, smartphones we got and the internet, I don't remember them all. But this is something that is good for our kids. It's the difference between playing with an iPad and going out and playing with friends with a bike. The library is something that we need to protect, and it brings tremendous value. And I thank the Vice Speaker for a wonderful amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Nicholas. Senator Barnett?
Siduos Masi, Mr. Chair, Manana Siduos to the people of Guam, and good morning. I rise in support of the amendment. I spent a lot of time in the public library system when I was a younger person. I always loved reading. They used to call me scholar back in school because I loved reading so much. I actually used to spend a lot of time here at the Hagåtña branch because I'd wait for my mom to get off work. My mom used to work for maids to order, cleaning offices, and so she would be cleaning offices in Hagåtña, and we would just, my brother and sister and I would be, it's almost like our daycare. We spent a lot of time in the library, going through old newspapers, and reading a lot of good books. I've spent so much time in the library, I feel like I could have worked there with that Dewey Decimal System, and discovered so many great books at the library. And I'm very grateful that my love of reading was also passed on to my kids. who also loved to read and participated in so many of these Dr. Seuss reading events at the library, and really just encouraged by Director Chris's efforts to really kind of lead what I see as a resurgence in the public library system. And, I've talked with the director, and there's still improvements to be made, especially with the operation of the libraries at the village level. But, it's interesting because traditionally, they usually stick a political appointee up at the library, and I know that they had a little bit of a rough time with this administration's first appointee. And so Mr. Chris, the director of the public library system, actually meets the qualifications set out in law for a director of the public library system. So, and I know that he had come from the public school system, so it's good to go to the library and to see all these ideas he has about modernization, because there was a time when you would go out in the villages, and I mean, still, I know there are some, you would see the libraries just shuttered up. And that just, didn't ever sit well with me because, our kids in the villages, they say the devil's going to find work for idle hands to do. And so, like me, I know a lot of our youth spend time at the village library. So any effort to support giving the public library system more money so that they can increase the access and the availability of libraries and library services, I really support, because, Lord knows, man, there's a lot of people should be reading more on our island. And I also think it's encouraging the way he's kind of embraced a lot of the modernization with the library, right? I mean, I remember back in the day going to the library, there was always a drag with new bestsellers that came out, and now you go over there and they've got all the, accessibility to the internet for a lot of people. They do a lot of outreach programs. And I'm not sure the status of the bookmobile. Vice, what's up with the bookmobile?
Yes.
Madam Vice, for some
Mr.
point of information.
Point of information. Point of inquiry. What is up with the bookmobile?
The bookmobile is still being worked on. They have trying to get more of the resources to get it going. I know that they're opening, the other libraries are trying to open more hours, but it is our hope, working closely with this August body, that the library will get all the resources it needs, so all of the stations can be opened at least during the government time. I know that the library does open on Saturday, if I'm not mistaken, and we're just hoping that all the more hours get in. But yes, the bookmobile is there, and they're trying to outfit it with all the orders that it needs to get it completely outfitted. So that's where we're at.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. Yeah, that was something we looked forward to when I was younger. There was two vehicles we loved to see going through Molesto and Kanani Road back in the day. One of them was the bookmobile, and the other was the Guam Bakery van. They used to go around the island. I don't know if you guys remember this. They used to go around the island, and they open the back, and they'd have all the donuts. You buy at 25 cents each. Yeah, so just really want to rise in support of the public library system. And, it's not too often that I commend a director, but I think Dr. Chris is doing a good job and is, willing to deliver the improvements that our public library system needs. Because, the more our kids read, and I go out to the schools and we read to the kids, and some of the books they like. I don't know if you guys know that Boom Chicka Boom Boom. A told B, B told to meet you the top of the coconut tree. They like that one. Another one that I always used to check out for my kids was Goodnight Moon. It's also a really good one. And really discovered a love of Stephen King. Loved those Stephen King books, man. And it was, nowadays, a lot of the kids, they're just doing this at night. Even my mom, they're just like scrolling all night, right? But back in the day, before all this technology, it would be this. And so, any way we can do more of this and less of this, I support it. So, si dus masi, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Burnett. Anyone else like to speak on the amendment? There being no one, Madam Vice, no need to close. Is there any objection to the amendment? There being none, the amendment passes. That would complete page 73. Does anyone else like to speak on that? If not, we will close page 73. It is now closed at this time. We are now moving to page 74, with Department of Youth Affairs. And before anybody asks a question, I'm going to provide some information so that we can try to nip some of the information requests. Yes, Department of Youth Affairs got an increase of approximately $1.2 million increase. Okay? Let's start with that. So I think that hopefully will nip it. And I know the next question is going to be what they're going to use it for. And I'll ask OFB if they can present that. Let's try to ease off the questions, pretty much. OFB, if you can provide what is the increase for and what, if they have any possible lapses. Steve?
What did the increase for Guam on the operations?
It's just this, the only thing that increased was the summary, that's just it.
The total bottom line increase for Department of Youth Affairs is, 30,000, approximately 30,000. The bulk of their increase actually is seen under the Summer Youth Program, which we increased by about 1.1 million. Currently, there are 600 participants within the program. There is a waiting list of approximately 1,500 participants, we were told. So we just increased it a little bit more, at least double it, to be able to serve these participants. And that's where the increase is coming from.
Okay, so with that, are there any questions for page 74, Department of Youth Affairs, which is only page 74? There being no questions, Madam Speaker, you have a question for Department of Youth Affairs?
So how many people would this now fund versus this past summer?
Currently, what we were informed that there were 600 participants, especially in this last program that just ran. They are or have been. We are told that there are approximately 1,500 participants that would like to join the program, but because of the funding restriction, they could only entertain 600 this summer. But they do anticipate to almost double, if not triple it, by next summer, thereby requesting the additional funds which we felt was warranted to be appropriated.
So if they double it, it would be 1,200. But you're saying, is this amount, just doubling the amount doubles the number of?
Little bit more than doubling, maybe about 800 more participants.
Yeah, 1.2 million. So this program, prior to this summer, where there was only 600 and so many people got turned away, actually was able to hire a lot more people. So how was that funded?
The increase in the program itself is 1.1. The total requirement for the program, I believe, is almost 1.8 million. So bear in mind that portion of the 1.8 also covers administrative costs for the people that run the program, the employees.
But those people are already employed at DYA. They're not hiring people to run this program, right? These people are already employed. This is another one of those administrative costs. I'm not.
Speaker, those people that are hired that run the program are being funded out of this appropriation.
But if we didn't fund this program,
Yes.
go back a couple summers. 2 summers ago, there was a lot more people hired through this program than the 600 that was hired in this recent summer. This was a small amount versus the summer before. And I'm asking, how was that funded, first of all? And these are all DYA employees that run this program. I'm not understanding why we need to fund them again.
Speaker, just the personal costs alone is around 824,000.
Personnel?
personnel. That includes 1, 2, 3, 4, five individuals are occupying position, and there's also a recruitment in progress.
But you're telling me 5 individuals at DYA are hired year-round to run this summer program
Yes,
for $800,000? No, no.
that's the way the program has been running, Speaker, for
Can you go back a couple summers? How was it funded a couple summers ago? Because there were a lot more students in there than the 600.
I
from
would
this
have to
summer.
go back and kind of like
Was that for-
analyze
I
that
want to know if that
information.
was like ARP or CARES money or something else that boosted that program. This is what they call the Governor's Summer Youth Employment Program, right? And it used to be the DYA summer program, always run through the DYA. We have employees who've been there who run this program every year. But now you're saying we have to take out of this some money for the summer program personnel costs. Anyways, before we talk about personnel costs, just talk to me about this 600, we're doubling it. How did we pay it the summer before that? What was the amount? Because they had a lot more students hired that time. I think they took care of everyone on the list. Remember, they had that whole long line up at Adelup one year, then they had the line at GPO.
Yeah, the funding for the current staff for the Summer Employment Youth Program is being funded out of the current appropriation in FY24. The authorized level of that is 616,000. And the total appropriation for the Summer Youth Program is 619,000. And this also includes
But what year are you talking about?
24.
24, okay.
Yes.
So in 24 we were only able to hire 600 people, 600 students. But the year before that, they were able to hire everyone on the list.
Senator, I would safely say at this point, just looking at what's being appropriated and the expenditure rate of the agency, that the agency is probably being subsidized with additional funds, most likely the ARP funds, that was able to fund the program over the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking if you can confirm. So FY23, what was the amount here?
I can get you that appropriation level.
And so they used ARP in FY23. In FY24, they didn't want to use ARP, and that's why they only did 600 students. And now in FY25, they don't want to use ARP, and they want general fund money, 600,000 more, or 1.2 million more?
Yeah, what I show for FY23 is approximately, hang on. Yeah, what they're showing in their expenditure report is 529,000. What they're showing in their FY24 authorized level is 619,000. And I believe that those costs, at least for current year in FY23, was to cover the cost of personnel. How they covered the cost for the program participants is probably through other sources, not identified in their budget.
For both years.
I believe so.
Okay, now that makes it clearer. So why now are we increasing this if we have the same personnel and same personnel costs? Now we're doubling this amount. Like we're going to fund the students that they've been funding for the last 2 years with other funds.
I can only surmise, Senator, the reason why we're picking up the cost now, because those funding sources, which I believe was the ARP, will no longer be available in FY25.
So how many students then are we mandating that they take care of with this amount? It looks like we're not giving them any parameters. They could use it all for personnel and tell us again that they can only take care of a few hundred students.
Again, it's just our approach in appropriating the funds to the program. If it's the wish of the body to itemize how they're going to spend these funds, that's up to the body. But this is how we appropriate funds to all the departments in the budget bill.
I'd just like to get an assurance that a $1.2 million increase for this particular program is going to increase the number of participants in the program, not simply increase personnel to DYA for one program. They have so many other programs. This is a summer program.
It is OFB's intent, Senator, to fund the participants in the program, and that is why that was our justification for the increase.
What was their request? $2.6. What was the governor's? That was the governor's request for this program or for the whole? Just for this program. All right.
We'll allow OFB to respond. What was the request of the agency? 2.6? Was it in fact 2.6? If they asked for more than 1.8, it's not too bad either.
The request for the program for the summer youth individuals is 1.4.
Point of inquiry or point of information?
Point of inquiry or information,
yeah, I'm
please.
going on your spreadsheet, and I'm looking at the section here that the governor's request was 2.6. However, if you do the comparable between executive and OFB, there was an $800,000 difference from their request. So that's why I came up with 2.6.
Again, Senator, what departments request, what's reflected in the department's budgets, we didn't follow that. We only used it as a starting point on how we can best utilize and spread out these funds. So
right,
yes,
no, I'm just talking about the governor's request.
Yes, they did request for that in the governor's request, but we reduced that, I believe, by 800,000.
Right, yeah, so
Yes.
I'm saying it was 2.6, yeah.
Okay. So that's a reduction. It's 1.8 now. Madam Speaker, do you have anything else on this section?
So, yeah, I just, I want to fund the program if the governor's not willing to fund it anymore through ARP. Are you saying that the ARP cannot be used in summer FY25? It has to be used by December 2024? What about the encumbrance? For example, she says she's going to use the ARP to fund the hospital, which is not going to be built by December 2024. How is she going to do that?
Okay, first of all, it's not that they cannot fund it. To my knowledge, ARP funds are to expire September 30th. There could be encumbrances, but those encumbrances can only be used to cover the costs of items that you've encumbered prior to September 30th. You cannot encumber ARP funds after September 30th.
All right.
All right, and so, all right.
Anything
I
else
guess
for
we
DYA?
have, I don't remember a budget hearing for DYA, unless I missed it, but so I would just want some assurance that we're funding additional participants in the program, that after you said we're funding how many personnel? 8 personnel in DYA full-time all year long for this summer program?
Currently, Senator, there are 5 people on board.
Okay.
They're also requesting additional 3, which are in progress.
Which are what?
They're in progress to be recruited?
And are you funding that?
Yes.
So you're funding 8 people to run a summer youth program in DYA full-time, all year long. We're going to pay their salaries, and so that will decrease then the amount of people, again, the students that we're funding through this.
I would assume that if the program is going to more than double their participants, you would probably need additional more bodies to handle the administrative and operational costs of the program.
Anything else, Madam Speaker?
Yeah, it's hard without DYA here. I'm sure they have a good explanation I'd like to hear, but the issue for me is, for example, the Division of Environmental Health. We need inspectors year-round, all year long. We need them to, their program runs continuously, and not all of these agencies are getting increase in personnel, but for a program that runs only in the summer. So I want the money to go towards the students. I guess I'm going to leave it at that because I didn't understand that's where that money's going, to personnel. And I can't make an amendment at this point until later. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senator Chadwick, you have any questions for DYA?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too had some questions with regards to this because ARP funding was used to DYA, and it's ironic that the amount of money that was appropriated to DYA from ARP funding was about 1.8 million to DYA. And if you look at the salaries on that, it was like 1.3 million just for salaries on what was appropriated to DYA. Now, is this something that they're going to continue on using ARP funding is a question I have. And right now, if you look at the report, there's about 274,653 still left over in ARP funding for DYA. I mean, is this money that they plan on using for the program? There are a lot of questions with that because of the ARP funding and the lapse that I was just, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, you were, but there's lapse money of $243,000 for DYA from the ARP funding based on the report that I have for June 30th, 2024. And again, it's just ironic that it's 1.8 million that was given to them, and I'm worried that, here we are again, using general fund to subsidize something that was handled through ARP funding, or even COVID money, or any federal funding that said that we should just use it for a one-time injection and that's it, not to sustain, to allow something to be sustained later on, or needs to be sustained later on. That being said, Mr. Chair, I think in the miscellaneous provisions, to make it clear that this additional increase into DYA is put to good use. As the speaker mentioned, that this is for the kids. And I'm hoping that that's the case.
Understood.
And maybe in the miscellaneous provisions,
Yes.
we can make a
The
comment to that.
the
Yeah,
comment
amendment
to
to
that.
that.
Yes.
Yeah. So I
All
thank
right.
you, Mr. Chair.
All right.
And I hope providing that ARP funding information is helpful
All right.
to us as well, that lapse of 243,000 that's in there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Senator Barnett, you have a question for Department of Youth Affairs?
Procedures Wasi, Mr. Chair. Just agree with the retiring speakers on this. And you see this a lot when you get these administrative costs. Sometimes, I'm not saying in this scenario, but you establish a program and then they hire just as many people as the program's going to benefit, like it's either PUA, So I agree with the speaker. If we're going to increase this, then it should definitely go to hiring more summer youth interns, because there was a decrease this year, and my office got a lot of concerns from parents who lined up for hours at George Washington High School, trying to get their kids a summer job. And I say, if the legislature is going to fund this, then can we call it the MISCELLANEOUS, the governor, and the legislature summer youth employment program? We share the credit on me. Yeah, this has been a recurring theme in this budget, even the last one. We're accruing all these new costs that we're using ARP funds to pay for. And now as all this stuff starts to migrate over to the general fund, you're starting to at least anyway, see a lot of, I mean, you know, what was that, 1.8 for the 1.3 in salaries? I mean, they're spending just as much on salaries as they are on the entire program. And for this summer program, I went through the emails. The only people who contacted us relative to this program were existing DYA staff. So, you know, I'm not sure. I mean, DYA, they do critical things. So I don't know if the summer youth program coordinators, you know, I don't know what they do in the winter. And I'm just not sure if it requires year-round employees to manage a program that really only lasts just a few weeks. But hey, it's go on for you. So yeah, I don't know how if we'll address this in the later chapters to really kind of just narrow and delineate the use of these funds so that we can really benefit and use this program for its true intent, which is to get our youth familiar with working. I remember I was in the summer youth program way back. I'm going to show my age here, but we were detailed to AHRD for summer youth. So the more youth we can employ with this summer youth, it's a summer youth employment training program, not the summer political hire training program. Gatson. See this, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm happy you participated because back then there was no DYA program for me. And I think that's for everybody here because I was a little bit older. Anyone else like to speak for DYA? If not, we're going to close DYA. Thank you. DYA is now closed. We're now proceed to page 75, Guam EPA. And let me see if there's any amendments. I see none. And then as EPA is page 75 and 76. And then ask the oversight chair if she has any question. Yes. And who's going to be followed? I think I saw a hand over here somewhere. No. Okay. Senator Paris.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I did check in with EPA. They didn't seem to have any objections, but I just have a concern because since we passed the Zero Waste Act, which basically gave them the jurisdiction for the recycling revolving fund, it's not listed in the section 1 of this bill, and so here there's an allocation. So my concern is, you know, do you have the numbers currently for the recycling revolving fund? How much is in the fund right now? I know EPA, they do want to partner with the mayors, but I just want to make sure that, you know, the funding is there.
I think isn't that on page 76, Senator Paris? The recycling revolving fund?
But,
yeah.
But there, you know how
there's more?
No, not in the first chapter is what I'm referring to. So you notice how in every budget you have a listing of all the special funds. The recycling revolving fund is not part of that list. And so I want to make sure that, you know, what you're allocating exists. So that's something of concern that actually, you know, I know this is a carryover from the last budget, but I think keep in mind there are rules and regs in place that governs this already. And so my question is, why was this a holdover when the rules and regs can actually govern this? In addition to how much is in there?
I'll ask OB to answer that because that's not a direct appropriation, so it's a matter of Steve can answer that question.
Yes, right now, Senator, we don't track the funds simply because we don't appropriate from it. So I can't tell you what the available balance is right now.
So that's the problem here. If we're going to allocate something where we don't know the amounts, I think that's a problem. And especially since you don't have access to the FMIS system where you have knowledge of real time of what's there. So why was this, you know, what was the rationale for putting it in there if you don't know what's in there, first of all? And second of all, by law, it's not supposed to be in the bill.
Yeah, based on historical data, I think the fund has been tracking roughly about $2 million a year. And I think, like example last year, we wanted to keep the appropriations not appropriation, but the allocation from the fund to the mayor's council to continue, I believe, their disposal of the vehicles and everything like that. So right now, since EPA is the only entity that's actually utilizing these funds, whatever funds are collected within the funds is at EPA's disposal. Because we don't appropriate. So whatever the fund collects, EPA has access to utilize those funds.
So I don't see any other special fund that's been allocated that's not on the list in the first chapter.
Special funds, Senator, that are included in the budget are funds that we appropriate out of. That's why you see it in the beginning in Chapter 1. All those other funds that are considered like revolving funds are not part of the budget because we don't appropriate from it.
Okay, again, we're running in circles here because first of all, you don't know how much is in the fund. And you're willing to say, let's allocate this amount. I think that's a problem. I mean, just speaking.
If I can just go back, I believe at the time we were doing this last year, it was the wish of the body to continue doing it this way. So that's why we continue the same approach to the fund in FY25. If the body wishes to change it, then I have no problem with it.
So according to the law, I even conferred with you on this, right? You said that, so if we can go back to Public Law 36115, it states that the funds shall be basically continuing and recycling. So, and it should be deemed appropriated until fully expended. So, I mean, I remember conferring with you on this, and you said that it was not going to be included in the budget. And so I'm just wondering, this is something that, we're basically not following this particular law. It's not to say that EPA, they're willing to supply this amount, to allocate this amount. It's just that as a matter of practice, why are we continuing to allocate something and we're not even tracking it, first of all? That's a problem, I think.
Senator,
as part of the budget process.
Just like the annual budget on the general fund revenues, we estimate how much we're going to collect during the year. We appropriate it accordingly. The way that is monitored is on a monthly allotment.
Okay, the other problem is you don't see what's there.
Yes,
I mean,
we don't know how much is coming in until
yeah.
it's over time. And after a certain period of time, like for the first month of the fiscal year, we'll know how much we collect. Bureau budget does its best to allocate only what is collected, not authorized. You can only release what we collect. It's the same theory with this fund.
But
we give them the authority to spend the money, but if you don't collect the money, you're not going to spend it.
I do recall last budget, we did put it in Chapter 1. So that's the difference. The difference is there was an amount that was put in Chapter 1. This time around, there's no amount, but you have this carryover from the last budget.
My colleagues, let's take a 5-minute recess and we'll take a look at the previous year, because there's a lot of assumption of some things. Thank you. We're on a 5-minute recess. committee of the whole is called back to order. There was question about how much is in the recycling fund. I communicated with the agency. They'll get back to me. As soon as we get that information, we'll have it provided. But I would have OB first respond to, in reference to the budget of 24. Steve, you can respond to if it was in the budget and how it got there or what happened to it. And why it's in 25 right now. So we can move along on this one.
Yeah. If I recall correctly, when the initial budget bill was submitted last year, and as we were going through the budget bill, these provisions actually were not in the initial budget bill, but I think through discussion regarding the fund, amendments were made to the bill which included these same provisions that we are showing in the FY25 requests.
Is that clear now, Senator Parrish?
Okay, yeah, I just, I'm raising the concern because if we're going to allocate something and we don't track, I think that's a fundamental problem. But if we can get clarification on how much is in the fund, and if we want to bookmark it so that we can get that information. If you wanted to move along, I just wanted to get clarification on how much is in the fund. If you want to contact DOA, who would have that information.
I contacted the agency, EPA, and they're going to give me a feedback. They're communicating their ASO to get that information. So we can bookmark this. If you would like to bookmark it, we'll bookmark it and come back to it. We still got a lot more pages to go in Chapter 5. Does anyone else like to speak on EPA, or so we can settle your concerns and then when we get the answers?
Yeah. The other thing I want to say that when I talked to EPA, they had no objections, but I'm just considering as a matter of protocol because they're willing partners they're committed to working with the mayors. They know that they're the biggest partners in getting rid of junk vehicles and recycling, cleaning up, beautifying the island. So they want to assist the mayors in carrying out this island-wide environmental cleanup program. But yeah, just a matter of protocol before we're talking about fiduciary responsibility of Guam, of our government. And, if we don't know the numbers, why are we allocating money if we don't know the numbers is my initial fundamental concern with this. And, I'm sorry, one more question for OFB. You said it's tracking how much? How much did you historically predict it's going to track?
All I can say is the previous balances in the fund was roughly about $2 million. We're not tracking. It's just that was the fund balance for the previous years.
Okay, so that's pretty much a big part of the what's in the recycling revolving fund, unless there's been lapses. And I do understand that I know there have been some issues with clearing POs, and so there might be lapses that need to be spent. But yeah, that's a big part of this fund. But okay, thank you.
Senator Parrish, and to my colleagues, it has a spreadsheet to me when they showed it to me, and please note that DOA still needs to subtract the 1.5 from the account to go towards MCOG, which would leave Guam EPA with a balance of approximately 1.5, right back to where we're at. Well, that's on the bill. And any other revenue balances, this is from EPA. Once they get the balances, then we'll be able to report that, but I don't think we need to hold back this chapter for that. That's going to be ongoing. At least the 1.5 is still recognized, and we can still move on this bill. Unless,
Sorry, Mr. Chair, so 1.5 million, does that before allocation or after allocation to the mayors?
this is their response. I'm going to read it one more time, okay? Please note that DOA still needs to subtract 1.5 from the account to go towards MCOG, which will leave Guam EPA with a balance of approximately 1.5. Also note that Guam EPA is awaiting for the revenue balances from DOA. So until that information comes in, I see no reason why we need to hold back when it's still recognized at 1.5. This is from the agency itself, okay, Senator Paris?
Okay, I appreciate your efforts. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That being, anyone else like to speak on the EPA? Madam Speaker?
This is Masi for clearing that up. And I guess for me, I agree with the point that we've already, in Public Law 36-115, just a couple of years ago, taken the recycling revolving fund out of politics, put it over to Guam EPA. It's a recycling revolving fund. We've given them total discretion how to spend it. They have absolutely partnered with the mayors and ensured allocation of 1.5, but they have strict rules and regs that the mayors must comply with. And otherwise, EPA seems to have no problem giving the mayors the minimum of 1.5, and I'm sure that they would look to giving them more. It's just a matter of getting the purchase orders through. So I don't think giving the money directly to the mayor's council and skipping Guam EPA is helping the situation. I think Guam EPA should be involved in helping the mayors to process this money quicker. My understanding is, yeah, they're just overwhelmed with how to get these invoices in the correct format, get them through consistently, and it's really, that's the only impediment, not at all that EPA is not willing to allocate this amount. I think EPA might be willing to allocate more, just depending on how much can be spent without being delayed in the procurement. So the section actually reiterates that they're going to do this pursuant to rules and regs. It's they have to do their expenditure plan. EPA reviews it all. So I don't think it adds anything to the budget, except it makes it look like we are giving the Mayor's Council more money when really we're not. Guam EPA Recycling Revolving Fund will decide to do that or not. The Mayor's Council has no discretion to use these funds for any other purpose. So it's not necessary. I don't think it's necessary. But I feel like we've told EPA, take control, do this pursuant to the Zero Waste Act, control these recycling revolving funds, get them out as fast as you can, get rid of any impediments. And I think in the further part of the bill, we are getting rid of at least one cap that might be an impediment in the procurement law for the mayors for the junk vehicles, and that might be our role here. But telling EPA how to allocate their recycling funds now, after they've already come up with the rules and regs of how it will be allocated, I just don't think it's necessary. And so I agree with the oversight chair of the Guam EPA that I don't see anything that the EPA is not doing that according to the law that we've required them to do. And in fact, I see them really trying as hard as possible. They know the mayors are the only ones that's helping them get these junk vehicles up, in a quick way. I think what the mayors are facing, according to their president, is the need for more certified haulers, right? Or those people who are certified by EPA to really pick up these junk vehicles, because they have such a limited amount of vendors. That's really what's holding them back. If they had more vendors, then that's the issue. But that they're working with EPA, because again, EPA is the one who permits those haulers. So I just think between the mayors and EPA, they have a good working condition, a working relationship. Not necessary for us to get to dictate anymore, like we did in the past, how these funds will be spent, since they are being spent pursuant to rules and regs.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak on the EPA? No one else? With that, we'll go ahead and close this chapter. Chapter on EPA is now closed. We are now in Department of Labor. Anyone like to speak on the area of Department of Labor, page 77 and 78? Looking for any hands. If not, we will now close. What, Abba?
Chair, you would tell us through every agencies, you know, if there was more or,
Oh,
you know, less.
okay.
Yeah,
Let me give you that,
Okay,
that
thank you.
information. Okay. On Department of Labor, there's a plus up of $181,000 more from their 24 count. 2024, it's up 181,000. Other than that, we don't see anything else. Yes,
Is
Madam
this the
Speaker?
first time we're giving general fund? Last year, we didn't give this general fund to the Department of Labor. They used the Manpower Development Fund, and that 181,000 increase is coming from general fund now. If you could just explain, I thought we were expecting more money in the Manpower Development Fund, but they're getting the same amount from the Manpower Development Fund, but now new money from general fund. Just why is that? Yeah.
In the executive budget, Speaker, what was, in executive budget, what was reported out of BBMR was an amount we thought was higher than what we estimated. I believe their amount was about 13 million. Our amount, when we did our analysis, came out to 12. So the difference there resulted in a shortfall in the requirements, the funding requirements for Department of Labor, thus us having to appropriate the 181,000 to cover that shortfall.
Manpower Development Fund comes from the H-2B visas?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that
The
again?
Manpower Development Fund comes from the processing of H-2B visas?
Yeah, that's correct.
So what BBMR expected as an increase, you're saying you don't really substantiate. But do we need to fund them then out of the general fund? Or
Updated information received from Greg Massey of the Department of Labor indicated that he himself does not see an increase in the number of H-2 workers into FY25. If anything, it's going to be a status quo
status quo?
to the number of H-2 workers that are currently being hired.
Okay, I thought I heard differently. All right, what about subsection 3? So the workers' fund is funded, the workers' comp fund, but the subsection 3, is that new or is that? Subsection 3, and it's to provide legal services, jointly fund an assistant AG for legal services. I guess it's authorization to use their
Yes,
fund.
Senator. The funding that's required for Section 3 is coming out of the department's total appropriation.
Right.
Yes.
But is this a new section, this authorization, or they had it before?
It's in the current year budget, Senator.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Barnett?
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to inquire if you have any, on the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, are there still staff assigned to that under DOL, or has that been closed out already? Is there anything reflecting on your end for the PUA?
I believe, Senator, to the best of my knowledge, all those employments are probably already expired. That there's no existing employment under the PUA.
Okay, so there's no, that program's been completely closed off from DOL?
Yes, to my knowledge, yes.
Thank you. Senator Fisher.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would just want to follow up on the speaker's questions about subsection 3 on, I believe it's on page 78, appropriations and authorizations for legal services for Department of Labor. DOL may enter into a memorandum of understanding to jointly fund. Who are they authorized to enter into the MOU with? Is that with the Department of the Attorney General, or is that with the Department of Administration? I'm on page...
I believe, Senator, this provision was to allow Department of Labor to hire an attorney to take care of their legal services. I'm not too sure. I'm pretty sure it's probably through contract. If not through contract, it's probably through an MOU with the Attorney General's office.
That was my question. If the parties to the MOU would be Department of Labor and the Attorney General, or would it be Department of Labor and Department of Administration?
It would be, again, it's again recording of the expenditures. If it's an attorney out of the AG's office, I'm sure his salary would be paid through something like a work request out of the Department of Labor. But of course, the transactions are being done over at DOA.
Okay, I guess I'm unclear. So we're not saying that the party, AG, needs to throw in money. This will be fully funded by Department of Labor?
If it's an attorney out of the AG's office, the way I understand it is that the attorney will assign, the Attorney General will assign an attorney to Department of Labor. Whatever time he provides to the Department of Labor, his time will also probably be charged to Department of Labor.
Okay. Okay, I assume there's some sort of parallel provision in the funding for the AG, which allows them to do that as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. There being no other hands, Department of Labor is now closed, and that's page 77 and 78. We're now at Department of Parks and Recreation, page 79. And we have a total increase in that of $840,000. Probably they're able to clean up the parks better. Senator Titlery, any question for that section, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a question. I didn't pull up my screen. I could have gotten the answer there, but I'm trying to keep this one where it's OFB versus 2024. But can you tell me what was the governor's request in the executive budget?
The total request for Department of Labor, Senator, was $5.9 million plus.
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
The total amount requested by the governors in the executive budget is $5,919,689.
What is the variance between OFB's, this budget, and theirs?
We gave them about $476,000 less than the governor's ceiling.
For what? For?
$476,000.
Okay. I did notice that, half of that $840,000 increase, a little less than half of it, came from the special fund. Which special fund did that pull from? Is that the Tourist Attraction Fund?
About $400,000 was given to the department for the restrooms, Parks and Recreation restrooms under their jurisdictions.
Under the Tourist Attraction Fund?
From the Tourist Attraction
Okay,
Fund,
so it
yes.
came from there. So that 400 increase was from there. Looking at last year, it was about the same that you gave last year too. And FY24 was 437. It's a little less than that, right? And now we're increasing the general fund by 431. Mr. Chair, does this cover as well the park patrol officers? Was there an increase in that? Because right now in Section 5, you have 90,000 shall be appropriated from the general fund to DPR for the payment for the parks. Was that the same amount for the park patrol officers? Because I do know.
The appropriation for Parks and Rec, their bottom line including funding for the park rangers.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious why this didn't go up. You know, we've had a lot of recruiting going on for the park. Am I in the wrong section, or is this?
No, in Section 5, that's the reservists, where the recruitment was booted up. It was increasing.
okay.
They're trying to get more full-time, not just reservists. That's what they're trying to do, and they're trying to figure out how to get some folks, because most of the folks that want to support are in the reservist site.
Okay, so this increase then of 400,000, technically it's really 431,000, then 800,000. Is that going in towards that area of the Parks and Rec?
If you're talking about the salaries for the park rangers, it is part of their operation.
Yes.
If you're talking about the park reservists, we appropriated 90,000 for the reserves.
Okay, no, I'm talking about the latter.
Yeah, so if you're talking about the
Park rangers, right?
the park patrol officers,
Yeah.
rangers, we appropriated $90,000 specifically for them for their stipends. But as far as the patrol officers, their salary is funded out of their general operation.
Okay, has that amount increased?
It's the same from the current budget, Senator.
That's odd, because we're seeing more people graduate, you know, working for the Parks Police. I'm surprised it's the same. Under, I think it was Joey Terlahi, you know, doing the training and getting these park police in place. I'm just surprised that we're at the same amount for them. So there's, in other words, there's been no increase then for that particular area, the park police.
No, plus it's the same as the governor's request.
Okay.
So generally, they're trying to figure that out, how to get people to apply and work as a park ranger.
Okay, so we're not seeing an influx of additional park police then being recruited and bring into the, so it's mostly on the reservists then?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I have.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak on the Department of Parks and Rec? Senator Barnett.
Just wanted to inquire on subsection 3, maintenance or repair of public restrooms, pool facilities. A sum of $400,000 is appropriated from the Tourist Attraction Fund of DPR for the maintenance and repair of restroom facilities at public parks island-wide and the maintenance of the Northern Region Pool and Complex and the Hagåtña pool facilities for fiscal year 2025. I think I missed that. Is the Hagåtña pool open?
To my knowledge, Senator, the pool is not open, but it's supposed to go online, I think, in the next couple of months after they finished all their contractual being. Maybe another year, but they're just budgeting for it, putting it in. Whether or not they're actually going to use it is a different story, but they did include it as a potential expenditure in the future.
Point of information, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Guåhan.
Actually, I think it was the week before last when Director Sablan came in. I asked that same question. He said the pool. I asked him exactly when the pool will be online, when people will be able to swim. He said we're looking at possibly 2026.
2026? Okay. Sí, dos más, sí.
Thank you. Senator Luan?
Uh,
Senator Luan,
Yes, sir.
your turn.
Oh, he's done?
No, he said thank you. So you're
Oh, okay,
next.
okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, again, yeah. I mean, that was a couple weeks ago when they came in here because actually I think it was your bill, Mr. Chairman, that they testified on, and that I posed that same question. You said I guess all the contractual work I think is just ready to be completed, and then it's going to go out in the bid. So by the time that goes out and all that, the completion is they're looking at almost 2 years, year and a half, 2 years to be able to get that done, considering again the length of time that they may need to award the contract. So 2026 was I think the safest date. I think it may be sooner, but he's probably buffing it in case there was a challenge or something like that. But he said 2026 was the.
Just on a point of inquiry, how much is allocated for the Hagåtña pool maintenance? Did they take down that part in our progress banner?
What was that?
Remember they had that part in our progress banner up there, the Hagåtña pool for like 2 years? They take that down? Is it still there? Aye,
Yeah. So.
it's still parted? Parted? Aye,
Yeah. So, okay. So, Mr. Chairman, yeah, thank you again, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's one of my questions, actually, because it was stated here that the Hagåtña pool was included in regards to the maintenance here. So I'm just wondering what maintenance, I mean, they could be bush cutting around all that, maybe if that's what the maintenance is around the area. But I think the pool facility itself is probably not maintained because that's a construction zone at this point. But my question as well, and is that the pool renovation or rebuild, whatever it may be, is that, Mr. Chairman, is that, are those funds funded under grants that they may have received or something like that? I mean,
In what area specifically are you asking?
yeah, no, I'm asking because, again, for the pool to be built or refurbished, whatever it may take to do, I don't know if it has to be dug up and then redone, whatever it needs to be done. Where is that money coming from? Is that money from for the renovation or the rebuild of the pool coming? It's not coming from the general fund, right?
That's correct. As a matter of fact, on the Hagåtña pool,
Yeah, Hagåtña pool. Yes.
I don't think we have the information on that one on how they're going to fund it. But supposedly
no,
they're supposed to
because-
kick an RFP.
Yeah, because even if it's 2026, I know we're looking a couple years from now, but there's no funding that's going to that, so that must come from another funding source.
Not from this body.
Yeah,
That's for
okay,
sure.
Okay, no, I just want to make sure. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Director Sablan said that they were grant monies and all that was been identified for that moving forward because they had to pay for the contract or the blueprints and all that to be done. So I think that's being done through, somebody has to be paid, and the funding has to come from somewhere. Yeah. Okay, and the other thing I know that they, I know Chief Terlahi had testified as well that, you know, they're in need of park officers as well. And I'm just wondering if this, because this 90,000 is basically going to the volunteer Territorial Park Patrol Officer Reservists. And volunteer, I guess, they don't receive a stipend, right, at all. So this defray the cost of maintenance of the equipment and uniforms. So my understanding is that other than the defray of maintenance of the equipment and uniforms, there's not a stipend included, right? It's volunteer. Is that?
Based on the bill as we read it, allowing for the patrol, the reservists, for the payment of allowances for
Appropriate general fund
No,
for the payment
there's
of
nothing
allowances
for-
of civilian, yeah.
there's no stipend. So
yeah,
we'd
okay.
have to look into that and see where.
Okay, yeah, no,
How
because
can
we
we
want, I mean, I know their need, and they're definitely, I mean, they've curtailed a lot of the potential situations that may happen in the parks, and I just want to make sure that if I mean, assuming at this point their services are volunteer and that these monies are just going to offset equipment maintenance and uniforms, it doesn't mention anything about stipend. And so I'm just wondering if a stipend is included in that or really they're strictly volunteer, because we want to be able to give Chief Terlahi, you know, the tools to
We're checking that right now.
Oh,
If the stipend, because the allowance, the word allowances is inclusive of that.
He's inclusive of that, yeah.
So we're just trying to find out what is that number for
Yeah,
the
what is that
stipend.
number? And, you know, is it sufficient to be inclusive of stipends? And if stipends are given, or is it strictly volunteer?
Understood. They're checking it right now.
Okay.
Senator.
Point of inquiry, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Are we able to find out from OFB, because, you know, the DPR has been giving away the parks to the mayors. So do we, I mean, is this 400,000 for the maintenance and repair of the public parks? Is that inclusive of the ones that they gave over to the mayors? No, so, okay.
No, it's not. Whatever's given to the mayors, that's their issue. As a matter of fact, on the hearing
I mean,
of-
like the recent transfer, you know, because they transferred at Fanana, Inalan Pool, Talafofo Bay, and then I think another park in Hoggett.
But there's a
Over
high
the
number
mayors?
of parks that are
Okay. Just checking.
definitely in dire need of repairs.
Yeah.
I know in Dededo alone, there's maybe 10 that have not been touched. So I understand where you come from. Do we have a number for?
Senator, if I can just answer, looking at the FY25 budget requests, there was nothing indicating for the cost to pay for stipends. The 90,000 is strictly just for the maintenance of their equipment and uniform.
That's pretty clear in the language, that that's what it is. But maybe can we clarify with them that to make sure that you know, they don't mean, or that it's meaning stipend too. I mean, I know the language is clear, and that's what you're translating, and that's what I'm translating as well, to be just the maintenance and uniforms. But if they're saying maintaining the stipends and all that, right? Because we want to be able to, you know, give him the sufficient amount of officers.
I will follow up on that,
Yeah,
Senator.
I appreciate that, because again, you know, sometimes the wording, maybe with in-house, it means all of this. But when it comes to black and white, we're looking at it a little closer than maybe the wide range of what it is. So, but assuming from how it reads is that they're volunteers. So, aside from just their uniform and equipment maintenance, they could strictly be volunteer. So, but if we can clarify that,
We will look into
and
that, Senator.
maybe we can put a bookmark in case we have to come back
Yes,
or something.
as a matter of fact, I would agree with you.
Okay.
Because I'm communicating with the director
Okay.
right now, because the stipend should be the same as you find for the police and the courts,
Uh-huh.
and to include DOC.
Sure.
So it's a question I was to ask to make sure everybody's the same. 'Cause
Yeah, make sure, because
Yeah, law enforcement, same
sometimes in-house conversation is different from the translation.
That's correct.
Brought towards us, right?
Yes.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right, and we're now, at this time, we will bookmark Parks and Rec. Anyone else want to speak to Parks and Rec? Because we're going to move on that, but it's bookmarked.
We can come back to it, but can I just ask then, in the meantime, of the 400,000 for the northern pool and the Hagatnya pool, if the Hagatnya pool's not coming online till 2026 and it's funded by grant funds, what is the amount that's allocated for its maintenance in this 400,000?
That's specifically for Dededo, you mean?
For Hagatnya.
For Aganda?
In their budget, Senator, the only thing they reflected was both the maintenance and the for the public restrooms and the facility. They didn't segregate it or separate the two.
All right, well, obviously, the restroom facilities at public parks does need maintenance. It's, sometimes they're fixed, and It's really incredible when all the showers are working at certain beaches or bathrooms are open, but then you go on another day or another week and it's just so inconsistent. Sometimes they're broken again, sometimes they're locked. We really need to get this regular, and I hope that this will be under the control of DPR then, this amount?
It's appropriate to the department, yes, Senator.
So the reason I'm asking if there was an amount allocated for Hagåtña, because if there was, I was going to try to move that over to the Historic Resources Division. It looks like they got a very small increase, but every time I talk to them, they just seem overwhelmed that they are short of employees to even monitor what's going on Guam, and they wait, they're kind of relegated to waiting for people to report construction activities that are not permitted or construction activities that might be impacting our burial sites or historic sites, and they are short-staffed. My understanding, I just found out over the weekend that he was the territorial archaeologist, was moved to the director's office and is no longer working with the SHPO as a territorial archaeologist. I'm not sure what's going on there. It's like they're moving people around. The SHPO was designated to not be able to handle any accounts dealing with telecommunications companies, including the burial site that they found up there at Alupeng, and the director has been appointed by the governor to be the SHPO for any activities involving telecommunications companies. There's things going on there we need to get a handle on, but I know for sure that I'm not sure if this is all the funding that they're going to get or if any of the general fund allocation also goes towards the resources, the Historic Resources Division. Are you able to tell?
My familiarization, Senator, of the way the department works is that, whatever appropriations are made to them specifically for a program, they will use it for that particular program. If it's short, they normally augment it with their total general fund operation. So I'm sure in this case, like I know for a fact that Parks and Recreation has been short over the last several years, that they are utilizing their operations to support and augment these types of projects.
Right. Yeah, I'm just worried that if us shorting this section allows, the destruction of our historic sites, and we find out about it too late. And so, yeah. Anyways, I can't tell from here how much is being augmented from the general fund in addition to this amount that is on subsection 4. But I am concerned. Thank you. So we're bookmarking this section. Thank you.
But we may not need to bookmark it now. The question was how much in the 90,000 on page 80 on section 5 is allocated for the stipend? I asked that question, and it is part of the allowances. They pay $500 a month for the stipend. And then the next question was how much money was for the Hagåtña pool that's being contracted to be repaired. It's $5.9 million, and that money has already been encumbered. And the funds, the question was, where did the money come from? The 5.9 came from a BSP grant in ARP, and that's already been encumbered. So that's why I think they're waiting for the, contract or whatever, so they can start the construction on the Hagåtña pool. Okay? I think that kind of answered the questions that we were bookmarking for. Does anyone else have any questions for Parks and Rec? And if not, we'll go ahead and close. Yes, Senator Paris.
What is the time? So I heard earlier that the timeline for construction is 2026?
That's when it's supposed to be completed.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's a 5.9 funded account.
Okay.
Okay?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. With that, Parks and Rec is now closed. We'll now move to page 81. Yes, ma'am. Senator, we're going to move to page 81. And Department of Land Management, and we do have an amendment from DMP. Yes, sir. Speaker, that's for you, ma'am. I get confused with the initials, but
Thank
anyway,
you.
for
Okay,
you.
so this one, again, it's new that we're funding them out of the general fund, $500,000 increase, I guess. If you could just explain that. In addition to the land survey revolving fund.
Yes, Senator, the land survey revolving fund right now is only tracking 3.3 million. Their operational requirements is 3.8, so that we are subsidizing land management about 504,000 out of the general fund.
Sorry, I'm sorry, Director. Can you just repeat that part? 4,000 out of the general?
Okay, the total amount requested by the department is 3.8 million.
Okay.
The tracking in the land survey revolving fund is only at 3.3 million. So the difference of 504,000 is coming from the general fund.
Okay, and the 3.8 that we're total is the same as FY24? Yes.
Yes, it is.
All right, so we're just subsidizing that land survey revolving fund that's tracking low.
Yes, and it's kind of like status quo from FY24.
Yeah, yeah, this is based on fees. I have discussed this with them over the years of, I thought they should increase their fees, right? You know, some of these are for what GLUC will review, and these are very highly, big projects, technical, but they seem hesitant to increase their fees for those things. But I don't think we're seeing a reduction in the use of land management or anything. It's just the fees are quite low. And I guess the fees no longer cover the salaries. This is mostly salaries, right? This has no equipment or technology upgrades. It's just salaries, the 3.8 million.
The increase, Senator, over the last couple of years is strictly mostly in personnel.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I hope that they consider looking at their fees again, especially for those projects going through GLUC. But my amendment, Mr. Chair, is that the unexpended appropriated funds available to the Department of Land Management shall not lapse and shall be available in 2025. If there are any lapses, I'm not sure.
All right. Does anyone like to speak on that amendment? If not, are there any objection? I see none. That amendment passes. Anyone want to still ask question for Department of Land Management? I see no hands. Department of Land Management is now closed. We are now on the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. Ay, lo que.
Oh,
Yes, Senator Tyree, please.
No,
Thank you.
after you, Mr. Chair, I'm sure
No,
you're going to explain the increase and why.
Increase of 115,000. Guessing it costs more to figure out why people die, but 115,000
The
more?
increase was due to, 115,000 was increased
Yes.
due to.
115, and that's where it got to 822.
Yeah, it was reduced, I mean, it was increased due to, why was it increased, sir?
Why was the increase? I'm going to sue, it's for the doctor and the staff, but I'll let OB respond.
The increase of 115,000, Senator, was attributed to increase in contractual and in personnel.
Okay, so there wasn't any discussion on increasing the, the salary to the medical examiner, but adding an additional staff to the office. Is that what you were saying, Steve? Because I know they're finding it very difficult to find one to come to Guam, and then having the other medical examiner had left island, but still being able to provide some kind of service via remote. I think they're trying to incorporate somebody else in that office to cover some of the workload and train that individual. So I was just wondering if this is for that individual, or is it to increase the money amount, the offer to a medical examiner to entice them to come to Guam?
The information we received from them, Senator, is that there is 2 positions in recruitment in progress. One is for a morgue attendant, and the other one is for a clerk. There was no mention about increasing the EM's
the offer.
Salary.
Salary for a medical examiner. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Anyone else like to ask questions on the chief medical examiner? There being none,
Oh, yes.
Madam Speaker, you wanted to get the clarification what they're hiring, the doctor and the mortician, I guess? I think that was
Yeah,
answered,
but, so you're saying that that increase only funds a morgue attendant and a clerk, but they had requested, remember, a new position, that new, I can't remember the name of it, like a death investigator. That was the big request that they had.
Speaker, if that, what we funded is exactly what they requested in their budget.
Medical legal death investigator, yeah, that's, remember there was a hearing, they talked all about, I'm trying to see, this is how they were going to be able to handle an off-island chief medical examiner while having a medical legal investigator on island at all times in the event of a murder or something else that needed to be investigated right away.
I think the way they're addressing that, Senator, is to a contractual basis.
The what?
Is to a contractual basis. In the event that we cannot fill the position of the medical examiner, there is a contractual, I believe, something in place now to have somebody in. I believe the EM from Saipan comes over every once in a while. So that's how they deal with this.
What is the increase in contractual that you said part of it's personnel, part of it's contractual?
It's approximately 74,000, Senator.
74. I think, yeah, it doesn't seem like any of this is the 74 in contractual or the morgue attendant or clerk is going to take care of this medical legal death investigator that they needed. Can we bookmark this section, Mr. Chair?
You want to bookmark the medical examiner?
Yes,
okay.
please.
Senator Barnett, you want to still speak, even though we're bookmarked? Okay. Yeah, you can speak later when you come back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, just because I do have a bill that I was planning to get on the September session relative to establishing the medical legal death investigator position. So yeah, if we could come back to the chapter.
Okay, good.
Thank
you. Or you may even consider that later on the chapter to introduce that. Thank you. And with that, we're going to bookmark page 82, Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. We're now proceeding on to page 83, Customs Quarantine Agency. And the amount of the increase is about $3.3 million. Remember, that is mainly general fund is where they're getting their money, their funds. And with that, any questions for Customs? Is an increase of $3 million. I'm looking around. Senator Brown? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to ask because I know, of course, with the pandemic, Customs was severely impacted due to the lack of, obviously, passengers coming in and out of Guam. But where were we then and where we are now? Because we are substantially now subsidizing Customs and quarantine. Of course, they indeed perform a very important need on the island, but I'm just curious, where are we? Because years ago, the policy of the legislature was ultimately to have Customs be independent with regards to the fee structures that they charge so that they were not on the general fund. And I see as a result of the pandemic, we've not weaned them off the general fund. As a matter of fact, the amount is, 14.2 million, or almost 14.3 million, versus their inspection services fund is only at about 7.3 million. Since they do have the opportunity to receive funds from their operations that other government agencies don't, we're not able to use this other money for those entities in the government that are unable to raise revenue but yet perform a very critical service. So where are we with regards to that? Because we discussed over the last several years that as Customs increases their revenue stream from their inspection fees, that the hope was that they would eventually be weaned off the general fund. And I don't see that we're anywhere near there yet. As a matter of fact, if you're telling me we've increased another 3 million, where are we with that?
Can you repeat your questions, Senator? I was sidetracked here for a second. I'm sorry.
Hopefully I'm not too senior and I can remember what I just said, but you know, we're always grasping to hold on to the thought. But actually what I'm asking, as Steve previously, of course, a substantial amount of Customs operations was based on their inspection fee. And then as a result of the pandemic, understandably, we did not have a lot of passengers coming into Guam. We did maintain the operations at the port, but not at the airport. And yet we have increased, we almost are now subsidizing Customs. And you know, but what the chairman said, we're increasing it by another 3 million out of the general fund this year. Where are we with this? Because there's only, right now, we're looking at 14.3 million out of the general fund, and their inspection fee is only at 7.3 million. What is the plan? I mean, I understand no doubt they provide a very important function to the government, but where are we? Because we do have government agencies that provide critical service that have no ability to generate revenue, and yet Customs has that ability, but now they are almost, you know, substantially subsidized now by the general fund.
Senator, yes, you know, we spoke to Customs and Quarantine and at length about their funding issues, and you're right. Ever since the pandemic, we've seen a drastic decrease in the Customs and Quarantine Fund. Over the years, specifically over the last 2 years, we've seen them actually grow almost 200% than it was after the pandemic started. They are halfway to generating sufficient funds to their 14-some million operational costs. Unfortunately, the government of Guam, where the general fund still needs to subsidize Customs and Quarantine for another 7 million. I spoke to Chief Pareto, and he said they are in the process of reviewing their custom fees, all their fees that they're charging, and they will submit that, and hopefully through that, they will close the gap of what they are short in their operational requirements, but I don't think it's going to be sufficient enough to get them up to the 14 million by the end of the year. So that's one of the steps they're taking to kind of like generate more funds for them. But in the meantime, the general fund will still have to be done to subsidize them until that time comes.
I know in this current legislature, legislation was addressed to allow them to automate their system so that as they have goods coming into Guam that they're inspecting, that they have a better system to actually process versus the old manual system that they've been using for years that has delayed their ability to actually address the appropriate charges or, more importantly, be able to collect on those charges. Do we know where that is at? So hopefully if they have that in place, that revenue stream that they've been losing over the last upteenth years can help bridge that gap. Because like I said, they are a revenue generating operation. And as we continue to subsidize, it means there's other critical areas like DISIT and other areas that provide essential services to the community that we're not able to fund. I'm a little concerned that they may be not necessarily the operations of the customs itself, but the administration of customs might get a little too comfortable on the general fund subsidy and not really strive to go back to being more independent so that those funds that we are now setting aside for them can be used for critical operations that don't generate revenue.
Part of our conversation, Senator, did include the possibility of them seeking other funding sources. One, I do believe they recently just got a federal grant of approximately, I think, $1.2 million. Hopefully that would help them cover some of the costs moving forward. They did also recognize the difficulties they have in tracking and actually monitoring, things coming in from the port, from the airport and stuff like that, and they're trying to devise a system right now of how to account for all those revenues and to include, of course, adjustments in their fees. So speaking to Chief Pareto, he was sincere about trying to address the shortfall and wanted not so much to rely on the general fund, but he says until such time, Steve, tourism picks up and we can adjust our fees, the general fund is just going to have to subsidize us for a while.
Well, I think it's important that we keep track of it because, as I've mentioned on previous fiscal years, I think as those amounts increase, I think, concurrently the amounts that are coming out of the general fund should decrease. Yes. In all fairness. I mean, that was a policy call that was made, of course, a number of years ago by the legislature, but until the time comes or that policy changes, I think we need to migrate them back to being as independent as possible, which gives them their own flexibility versus continued subsidies out of the general fund that, again, limit our ability to appropriate to other critical services as well.
Senator, just to go back to what the speaker earlier said about agencies having to probably go back and revisit their fees and see whether or not what they can do to adjust those fees to bring them up to par to cover their operation. In our conversation with all the agencies that came to our office this year regarding their budget, that is one of the things I encouraged them to do. One was to go back and reevaluate their fee schedules, to put them in line and bring them up to date with their costs. And most of them have indicated they will do so and consider it. I told them, no, don't consider it. You need to do it because the longer you take, the farther back you're going to fall behind. The other thing, too, was the ability to go out and secure federal funds. There's hundreds of millions of dollars out there available to government of Guam. And this government is just not going out applying for it. And that's part of my spiel to them to help, fund their operation and don't rely strictly on the general fund.
Well, and I just think we need to keep this particular agency on the front burner, Mr. Chair, because certainly as time goes on and we don't have the luxury of all this cash infusion that the government's received over the last few years, I think it would be critical to Customs' continued operations that they become more independent so they're not limited by potential major cuts that may come down the road as a result of decrease in overall revenue of excess funds coming into the government of Guam. Thank you for the opportunity to ask and have these questions answered.
Thank you. Senator Tydek, raise your hand.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to see if I'm reading this correctly, because even though there's an increase of $3 million increase, I think, Steve, you mentioned earlier about the federal funds. It's at $1,230,075. That was federal funds that actually helped increase the all-around budget, right?
That's correct.
Okay, and which was not given to us last year. I noticed that in the FY24, it was not in the FY24. I'm also noticing that in the special funds section, in last year's special funds, there was an appropriation of $6 million. We're starting to see a little bit more, money coming into these special funds, especially on the tourist attraction fund. It's projected a lot more than we anticipated in FY24. I mean, we're at about $6 million right now in excess on the tourist attraction fund. So I guess your increase in the special fund section by adding an additional $1.7 million is based on those numbers that's tracking in the custom and quarantine special fund.
There's a correlation, Senator Diaz, between the visitors' arrival
Yeah.
that's funding the TAF and also funding also the Custom Agriculture and Quarantine Inspection Fund.
Yeah, because we're always concerned, starting to subsidize through the general fund, like our good senator from Chalampago mentioned. That's only a 365 increase out of the general fund for customs and quarantine. But I'm seeing that the majority of it is coming through special funds on a 1.7 increase, and of course this federal funding of 1.2. So I was quite concerned when I saw the increase of 3.3 million. So greatly appreciate the Customs and Quarantine, their work on obtaining that 1.2 million. That's a good job. So let's hope, like you said, the other agencies look after that too as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to recess and come back, and we'll pick up with Senator Barnett in the Custom and Quarantine section. Thank you. We're going to come back at 2. All right? Thank you.